Okay, all right, Francine. Do you want to tell us a bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today?
Of course. I am currently the director of talent acquisition for PLANTA. What got me to where I am currently, since I was 14, I always had an attraction for the hospitality industry. Just I think that the people component was a piece that really drew me to the industry. And so I started working at a local Chinese over-the-counter restaurant and continued to grow my career within hospitality. Later on became a server for a full-service restaurant. As I grew within the industry, I started opening restaurants. I opened about 6 restaurants as a lead server, bartender, and then manager. Pretty quickly transitioned to a supervisor role, then a management position. And from there, I really loved witnessing, experiencing new restaurant openings, right? I was really curious about, how we select talent, how, we identify the talent that's going to make this restaurant industry or this restaurant specifically, successful. And are we going to help those individuals be successful? And so there was a peak in my curiosity there of how that worked. And I always wanted I always gravitated towards the talent side, right? I was
Yeah,
doing training and such. So that's what got me to talent acquisition. I got an opportunity in agency, and from there, now Planta was able to merge two of my loves, which was recruitment and hospitality, and here we are.
that's awesome. And I guess when I think about, you think about like isolating talent, for example, like how do you think about the staff that you have today? How do you think about like, the trends of like demands, behaviors that like existing staff have today, say in a post-COVID world? And how do you think about policies and programs for keeping good talent and identifying great talent?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. There has been a huge pivot, and you said it, since COVID, right? And so, first off, when we're identifying talent, right, we have to isolate the idea of finding the perfect resume, right? We have to isolate the idea of having somebody that has had career progression within the industry, right? We were looking for more niche resumes at one point, and we had to open ourselves up to be able to just have conversations with people, right? And no matter whether they came from the restaurant industry or not, right? If we found that there's skill set that could be transferable, but the key component is the people piece, the guest experience, taking care of our team members, then it's something, there's other aspects that we can teach, right? So from identifying talent, we have to quickly pivot on, what we found to be successful talent, right? And if we can teach, and if we like Planta, for example, can teach them everything else that has to go into the industry. So that's the first piece. But then the second piece is once you get them in the door, right, and they're with us, they're part of our team. It's important to at that point, I think a lot of people have really pivoted from focusing so much on the money and more of what benefits, right, does the company have? Does the company take care of the employees? What is the growth potential, right? And really highlighting those pieces. So we started to really think about what would somebody want from a benefits perspective that would keep, them with us. And we launched ClassPass, for example, right? It's a wellness application for our leaders and discounts for our hourly team members, right? Medical, dental, vision,
Yeah.
and having that provided. And so PTO, just making sure there's a balance in the benefits piece. And more importantly, offering them the opportunity to grow, right? Having that nurturing approach and being coaches and leaders instead of managers.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. I think just a few sentences ago you mentioned like there were like niche requirements. Like what were the sort of niche requirements that you subsequently changed?
What were the niche requirements? before?
Yeah, you'd
Uh-huh.
mentioned that there were niche requirements, but you've kind of ended that sort of practice. Was there a particular type of hospitality worker that you were looking for that was just too hard to find?
Well, pre-COVID, right? We would always look for, there's certain things, and it really depends on the level, on the position, on the skills, right? But really
Um,
looking for other restaurant groups that are comparable to Planta, right? From full service concept, right? The level of service, do they have steps of service, right? The food, right? The food component is important. The steps of service is important. The culture is important, and then all those pieces, just really identifying. Somebody who has worked at a similar establishment and has developed the skill sets that we need versus us now being more open to somebody maybe in the quick serve fast casual space, or having somebody that is working in retail, right? And that
yeah.
again just has that foundation of just of the people component that we can, the other skills we can teach.
That makes so much sense. I've had plenty of your peers on, and they talk a lot about, you can train service in people, like you can upskill a lot of people to be like very ready to work in a lot of different sort of dining experiences. But I guess what cuts the wheat from the chaff is like empathy and finding a
Mhm.
sort of je ne sais quoi in the employees. Is there particular intangibles that you look for in sort of your promotable staff, like staff that you think, okay, that person to be promoted? Are there things about them that you think that you look for?
Yeah, every business is different, but passion is something you can't teach, right? And you've alluded to that right now. So passion is something that you can teach, and passion is something that you cannot teach specifically in hospitality. And having that human element and component, right? And for somebody that's being promoted to a leadership capacity, right? Let's say, or just being promoted in general, right? You're leveraging two different relationships. You're leveraging the relationships with your three different relationships with your peers, with and with those that are reporting into your team, right? And then also the guests. And so there has to be a level of like understanding of having a passion for hospitality, right? And some things
Yeah,
just come automatically, right? And so and having that passion and that human element of understanding people and being empathetic, and also I think intuition is a big one as well. So those are things that you can't really teach. That's something that comes from within.
yeah, no, totally, and that makes tons of sense. And it's like, I guess that's what elevates the best in hospitality from those that are really good.
Hmm.
Like we said, we can train them, we can train people's service, but some people just have an innate love and passion for hospitality, and some don't. And I think that differentiates, enormously in terms of like identifying talent and then nurturing and grooming talent. When it comes to like challenges that you face, like in your role, like what are like sort of the three biggest challenges that you face in the hospitality space as a talent acquisition leader, rather?
Yeah, yeah, no, that is a great question, and again, that is a more recent challenge that we're all trying to pivot towards, and that is, post COVID, a lot of hospitality professionals or people within the hospitality industry left hospitality, being burned from hospitality during the pandemic, where it was hit, pretty significantly hard. And so,
Yeah,
with that, there's a higher demand, and it has been a candidate driven market. And it being a candidate driven market, there's a lot more options for the workforce of, places that they can work. And so I think there's a little bit of less tolerance for, there's a little less tolerance, and some of the employees are a lot quicker to, just leave or find another
yeah,
opportunity where there's a little more loyalty, when I first started in the hospitality industry, even pre-pandemic. So those are some of the biggest challenges that we're facing, which, kind of loops back to that first question that you asked, what we're doing to really retain talent. So I think retention is such a huge topic right now in hospitality,
yeah,
because of that, because there's a little, and I think it also comes with, you know with being burned by the industry, so there's less tolerance for it, right? I always like to compare recruitment and an employment with a relationship. It's a different type of relationship, right? That you have with your families, with a loved one, but it's still a relationship. And so if somebody has done something to you, you kind of have that chip on your shoulder. So, you know, you have less tolerance for certain actions. And so I think that is causing a bit of, you know, I guess less loyalty, right, in the industry. And so I think that would change and pivot, and it's changing a lot. But that has been one of the biggest challenges we've really faced.
Totally. It's interesting you use like comparing it to dating, because I remember when I started in this industry like 18 months ago, that ghosting was the phrase of the day, you know, where people are still ghosting interviews, but that was the phrase of the day then. And it's very much like a dating phrase. And it's interesting to me that, like, you know, you bring up the phrase of loyalty, because it's like, why, if a restaurant would treat you badly or a business would treat you badly, would you want to stay in that business? You know, and I think lots of hospitality workers post-COVID have sort of realized that there is an insane demand for a lot of their talent, and inversely, or conversely rather, what I'm hearing from all the people I have in this podcast is that by resetting post-COVID in terms of like your employee brand, and resetting in terms of like what the sort of new modern sort of hospitality worker wants, you can provide benefits and provide a working environment that might not necessarily pay as much as working in an Amazon factory, but is not as bad as what The Bear or Anthony Bourdain Kitchen Confidential speaks to, or TV. You know what I mean? Or like Randy's Kitchen Nightmares. That, like, you know, this has been a reset in terms of how kitchens and restaurants operate and how they treat staff. And it sounds to me like that's kind of what you're alluding to all throughout this conversation.
Absolutely.
And so I guess then, in terms of like, you know, this sort of workforce that's kind of come into the hospitality space, in particular post-COVID, you know, we had that sort of 2.5 year gap where people who would have been trained, would have had their first sort of jobs, would be graduating to sort of managerial positions now in a lot of restaurants. And a lot of managers left during COVID and haven't really come back. Have you seen a sort of gap in managerial positions across all the brands, or a difficulty in hiring managers in a way that probably wasn't there before?
Is this question in regards to like a CV, like seeing gaps in their progression, or seeing gaps in, like, for example, in a company's?
Well, it's more like one of the things I hear from a lot of people is that, like, you know, we can get staff into the restaurant now, you know, top of funnel, we can get bodies, we can get quality bodies. But one thing that seems to be missing across the board is quality restaurant GMs. You know, people who run the restaurant themselves. It seems like there's a lack of them in the industry today, and that's like, you know, twofold. Like, one, people left during COVID that were managers that just never came back, and then there's a whole class of people, a graduation class almost, of people like Gen Zers haven't graduated up those ranks yet to become the type of GM. So there's a kind of gap at the moment, and there's only so much supply.
Yeah, no, we're definitely seeing, yes, we are definitely seeing a gap specifically in leadership capacity, like a general manager, right, an executive chef. Those are a little bit harder to come by. Why? Because we either are finding very junior level talent, a little more green, right, that aren't quite ready. Now, do we have a program that can get them to that point? Absolutely. There's some that are really fixated on having that title, right, or having that position. And quite frankly, like, we're just not in a position to set somebody up to fail. And, you know, we're very transparent when we have those conversations. Listen, if I put you in this position, you know, we don't want to set you up to fail. And so that is just not how we want to go about, you know, assisting or you know, or anybody's career. It's not going to be favorable to them. So so we are finding a gap. Either we're finding candidates that are too senior, right, in terms of their directors of operations, right, and there is a certain timeline that they have. If they're willing to go to a management position, a general management position, there's an internal time clock or timeline that they have where they want to get back to that director of operations position, right? And so,
Yeah.
and then we have on the flip side, a manager who's a little too green and too inexperienced in that capacity, has not had a chance to read over P&Ls, and does not understand the business acumen side of it.
Yeah.
And so yes, there is a gap. But we right now, the business model that we're really adopting is to promote from within. It's
Yep.
something that we've adopted for as long as I've been at Planta, and so our goal is to promote the majority of our leadership team.
Yeah.
And so that's really the model that we are going after, because we rather promote from within than hire somebody a little more junior for that position, right?
That's amazing. And I'm sure your staff love that as well. Like that
Mm-hmm.
sounds like a real like ownership mentality that you guys have over there.
Yes, yes, and we have, which is amazing just to see. We have a lot of success stories, which we communicate that a lot in the interview process, of like people who
Amazing.
are with us currently that have grown within our company substantially.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Sorry, I just took a sip of water there while I was saying
All
that. I was like,
good.
that's all. That's awesome. That's awesome. I guess on that very topic, like on the quest for talent, like what do you think of the job market? Because you're down in Miami, so you're like in your own sort of unique bubble.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that question clearly. Can you repeat that?
Sorry, I'm saying that this sort of quest for talent that we're all on. What's your take on the job market? And I'm curious yours because you're also down in Miami, Florida, which seems to be its own sort of unique bubble as well. Like outside of just a national context, you've got the Miami context. So I'm curious your take on the job market for hospitality.
Yeah, you nailed it. Every city, every area, every market is different. But I think you know, it's really changed a lot. It's the conversations are a little more difficult in the sense that they're a little less professional than they used to be. It's there's no like preparation, right? When you're interviewing somebody, there's no preparation prior to the call. No, some people are not really doing a lot of research on the company, which I think is so important, right? If you have an
Totally.
interest in a company, why wouldn't you look to see, what you're applying to, right? And so, and especially when
Totally.
it comes from applicants. And so, it becomes less of a productive conversation, really, and it's more of an educational conversation, right? And so, the lack of preparation is just something that I think I'm still trying to navigate through, right?
Yeah.
And the lack of professionalism sometimes, um, just sometimes being in the kitchen. Let's say a chef will be in the kitchen, which I understand, right? They're working, but I think there's a time and place, and we're very flexible in terms of when we can take a call, and so really
Yep.
working around their availability. Or when you're sometimes in a car, right? There's a lot of background noise, and so it's really been a really big shift, and I would say it's in every market, and
Yeah.
so um, I don't know what the solution to that is going to be in the future. I don't know. I'm still kind of trying to wrap my head around that lack of professionalism in that initial interview stage. And it comes in all levels. Like, I mean, I have had that from directors to a sous chef, right? And so but yeah, it's been tough in that sense. It's not hard to get. I don't think it's lack of talent. I get amazing resumes. It's not lack of
Yeah.
talent. It's not lack of applicants. It's not lack of interactions. I mean, we source, we look for people. We do everything that we have to do to get the right talent. It's when you hop on the phone that there's little interview etiquettes that are just not they're not happening anymore, and I'm still trying to just wrap my head around that and how to navigate through that.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. And it's interesting because you're obviously in a very unique sort of business as well, which is the plant-based sort of like food. So you'd think that people would be like more eager or more interested in sort of like the future of food, sustainability, that kind of stuff, you know,
Hmm.
like have questions about that. Like I would have questions about that. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right.
So it's fascinating because, you know, if you were in a sort of relatively famous American chain, you know what I mean? Typical sort of like highway kind of chain, like I would get that why people wouldn't really have any questions about the history or the story of the business or how it kind of works. You know what I mean? Versus like
Hmm.
yours is like very unique. So yeah, I think that's very, very interesting insight. I mean, we hear that all the time. You know, I guess like in my job, that's what we do. We place people and we hear the difference between candidates and quality candidates. You know, and what are the sort of things that make a difference there? And to your point, like preparation and understanding that business is probably like priority number uno. You know,
Hmm.
yeah, it blows my mind. I'm like honestly, like I'm fascinated by that comment.
Hmm.
And I think, you know, on that comment, I think that's it.